Podcasting from a secret location deep inside the political colossus. This is Radio Free GOP, the voice of the Republican resistance.
Part of the beauty of me is that I'm very rich. Let me tell you, I'm a really smart guy.
What's your name again? John Miller. And you work with Conga? Yes, that's correct.
Oh my God, they've got a madman on their hands.
We will have no truce nor parley with you or the grisly gang who work your wicked will. You do your worst, and we will do our best.
We've come to a turning point, a moment for hard decisions. If not us, who? And if not now, when?
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the walls. The chair is against the walls.
This is Radio Free GOP with your host, Mike Murphy.
It's early in the morning here in Cleveland. It's Wednesday. Last night, Donald J. Trump was nominated as our Republican candidate for president of the United States. Well, the sun still came up this morning, but I have to tell you, have no doubt, a whole lot of things have changed in American politics and for the Republican Party. We're going to talk about it here on Radio Free GOP.
He used to have a big career, but now he's had enough. Podcasting's like therapy. His shrink says it's great stuff. Radio Free GOP.
Look out, Cleveland. The political colossus is here, and it's hungry. It's here to feed. This is a great, great town. I like Cleveland. It's a no bullshit, we make things kind of city, much like my hometown of Detroit, about 2 hours north of here, so I feel very much at home. We've been doing our interviews out of the Harbor Inn, the oldest bar in town, across the river from the finery of downtown, where the convention is being held. We have a great interview today with Jonathan Martin, the New York Times national political reporter. He's going to talk about how the media beast feeds. And that's what these conventions are all about. The news that is happening here is sort of small. It's predetermined. They already know Donald Trump is the nominee, was going to be, and now is here on Wednesday morning. So what they look for is the sidebar, the human interest, the strategy, what the campaign is doing to try to use this convention to send a message. And what they pounce on is screw-ups, failures, and shortcomings. So the first 2 days, it's been a feeding festival. The media beast is hungry, and it is getting fed. They love nothing more than a kerfuffle about speech writing or something like that. So the job of the professionalized campaign is not to have those mistakes. That's not been the case here. Day one, awful rough. First, the campaign decides somehow to declare war on Governor John Kasich of Ohio, the host governor here, the most important swing state. Don't quite understand that. There was already bad blood because Kasich, like many Republicans, is not comfortable with Trump and the things he said. I'm on the Kasich side of that equation, as you know, along with Mitt Romney and Jeb Bush and others. But you try to ameliorate those problems when you're in the home city. Kasich was under some pressure to try to make things work here, and instead they picked a fight. That was a dumb thing to do Monday morning. Then they got out the hammers and the pliers and really got rough on the convention floor. And you can argue it was necessary to move things around, but a little finesse would have gone a long way. We didn't see it. That created another media kerfuffle, Colorado delegation walking out. All the drama, lit up cable TV, not what you wanted at a convention. And then finally, the big finish Monday night with Melania's speech, which I thought was good until we found out it had been expertly crafted by the speech writing team of Xerox and Conga. So what did the Trump campaign do? Did they fix it? No, they dug in. This is what the Trump guys love to do. When they make a terrible mistake, I think they have a meeting. How can we make it worse? Well, we're deny the obvious and dig in and extend the story another day. And that's exactly what happened. It was incompetent, and it made most of Tuesday pretty awful as well. There's been a lot of media speculation about how the speech happened. In fact, yesterday, and I'm going to sound like a pundit idiot here, but I was in the green room. I did the most excellent and always fun Charlie Rose show between my NBC work, and I was talking to Matt Dowd, who's a kind of independent political pollster, used to work for President Bush. Before that had been a Democrat, so he's seen this thing from all sides, for good or bad. And we were talking to John Heilemann of Bloomberg, and we were all saying the speechwriter screwed up. We don't think it was the professionals. And I kept saying, I think they brought in a psychic nutritionist friend of Melania's for the last-minute re-edit out, and there was no process, and Dowd kind of agreed, and we said there's some junior staffer somewhere. And sure enough, today in the New York Times, they found it. Former ballerina / English major, friend of Melania's, who apparently was the last pen. She's not talking, but we have a feeling that's how this happened. It was a train wreck, and they made it worse by not responding very well. So that one seems to belong to the campaign that ran a process that ultimately put a critical speech in the hands of a not politically experienced, quote, ballerina / English major, unquote. God fears the Trump presidency. Things got a little better for Trump on Tuesday night. I thought his son gave an excellent speech, delivered it well, and it was well written. It was not brilliant oratory. It was not soaring heights, but this thing is clearly being graded on a curve now after the train wrecks Monday night. And it did something the Trump campaign needs to do more of, something they've shied away from to their detriment. It made an argument about Republican philosophy. It also hit kind of the idea of blue-collar wisdom. That is the left-behind vote in the modern economy. Trump is having a resonant effect with those voters, though not always for good reasons. And it made a more principled argument there that I think may resonate a little bit. So Tuesday night, bit of a recovery. Chris Christie came to play, too. It was interesting. You can tell his speech was fueled by, I believe, an attempt to show Trump what he's not getting by not picking him for VP. Now the pressure will be on Governor Pence tonight to light up the hall as well. And Pence is not an epic platform speaker. So Trump, who I believe was buffaloed into the choice of Pence by his staff with all the leaks of it was going to be Pence. They kind of cornered him a bit. Is probably going to be vibrating a little bit as he wonders what could have been if he totally had his way instead of being pushed into this. Now, they had their reason to pick Pence. They got problems on the floor. We saw it Monday. There's not a lot of enthusiasm here for Trump. This is, again, kind of a shotgun wedding convention. Pence resonates more with the grassroots delegates because he is a Christian conservative, as are many of them. Trump was looking, I believe, at some trouble on the VP nomination. You don't appoint. The floor nominates and elects, and the floor doesn't love Trump. So by picking somebody who's very akin to at least half the delegates, Trump wraps up all the VP trouble in a bag and makes it go away. I think that was the strategy of the staff. I understand it. It was tactically adroit. But what kind of campaign are you running when your vice presidential choice has to be used to mollify your convention, which ought to be an easy coronation and a platform to reach out to new voters and expand your appeal? We're very much stuck here in Republican primary land, which is not what a convention should be about. So the narrative of this convention has not been that of the normal convention, which is how does the campaign launch for the general election? What are the broader themes? How does the party grow? This convention is about, can Trump survive to the next day? It's like watching the great Wallenda after a meth bender going across a high wire wondering if Carl will make it or not. And that's not what you want a convention to do, let alone the technical stumbles, the half-empty hall, the speaking time order. Take Joni Ernst Monday night, who was shoved late at night into a half-empty hall. I'll bet the Iowa hog castrator has her shears out and is looking for the staffer who made that decision. You can see it a little bit on the faces of the fixers, the Fugleman, the people who are part of the subculture of running Republican conventions. They are pros. They are here. They're going to deliver a convention. They've seen the campaigns at the top come and go, and they have a professional pride in getting the job done. But they're struggling. You can see it's joyless. You can see it's a slog. It's Stalingrad. It's an obligation. It's not a romp or a joy. And so they're pros. But much like Broadway stagehands who've seen a lot of shows, they can tell they got a turkey this time. That said, the show must go on. And a show it is, mostly for the media, a little bit for the delegates, and it's a spectacle. Outside, it's an interesting universe. There's an alley of bars and restaurants that's sort of narrow, about a block long, right off the convention, and right outside the steel fence perimeter, which is being strictly enforced by the Secret Service. So that's where a lot of the media action is. But it's open. It's open to the public, which is both great and slightly terrifying, because every cranking nut for 500 miles is here marching around with a big megaphone decrying the Pope, or, God help us, a banging drum. Some of the SNBC outdoor sets are there, so I've done a little work from those locations where you're about 4 or 5 feet off the ground, and behind you, 4 or 5 feet away through some bicycle fencing, are screaming nuts. So you hear them, you don't see them, and you notice that almost anybody can walk in there. So It's a little bit of a show outside. There are mounted police everywhere. There are police everywhere, period. These things are also police conventions, and they are doing a terrific job. It is hard work to tromp around all day in 89-degree heat with your riot gear. Cops from everywhere. There are Indiana state troopers from next door. I saw California state troopers. There are, of course, Ohio state troopers who all look exactly like drill sergeants, by the way, with the hats and the chins and the buzz cuts. They're quite fearsome. And the cops are doing something a little new here that I haven't seen at the 9 other conventions I've been to. They walk around in Conga lines, about 10 to 20 cops, 2 by 2, just kind of snake around in these roving Conga lines of different police departments. That makes them very visible, very quick to deploy. They're great. They're nice. They're polite. They're casual. They're walking around, but you see them everywhere, and I think that's a huge part of the deterrent. Other cops are buzzing around on bicycles. The perimeter is full of uniformed and plainclothes Secret Service, and a convention of bomb-sniffing dogs, too. It was interesting. One of my Uber drivers, I had a pass that would get me through a checkpoint, and I kind of hinted that we could take a shortcut through there, and he looked at the fence with the concrete movable barrier and the Secret Service guys and the dogs, and he started to vibrate a little bit. So I had a feeling he was a little worried, not about explosives, but other controlled substances that might be in the car somewhere. So I let him off the hook. But there's a lot of canine nose action going on here. And all in all, highly professional, highly safe, and I appreciate what the cops are doing. But that press alley where everybody is, taking over those bars and everything, is the Star Wars bar scene. So that's a little hairy, and a lot of the pundits are chattering about it because pundits have an incredibly well-honed sense of survival, and we're not Patton's Armored Division, so everybody's a little twitchy there in that alley. I also met some great people, though. Some podcast listeners were there. Thank you. I remember, I think Chip from Tennessee came up. We did a selfie, and then 2 drunk girls tried to kiss us. So here we are, Woodstock for political nerds. Now, before a few words on the bigger significance of all this going forward, let's stop and do a little commerce.
Radio Free GOP.
Okay, it's commerce time. We're still negotiating with advertisers. And again, help me get rid of this postage meter, internet something, postage-something.com. Or another great advertiser, we'd love to plug you because I'm tired of paying for all the yes men and psychic nutritionists around here, including our new ballerina/English major who wrote these words for me to end the segment with. Let's try them out, see how she goes. Okay. 77 years. Oh, yes, we are going to have to fire her. But you can help the podcast 2 ways. You can buy our great American-made American Apparel t-shirt in formal navy, ready for the opera with our logo on the front, or in casual white with red ink. They're on the website, radiofreegop.com. On the same website, you can click our little Amazon button, and then a few shekels fall off the truck for us every time you buy something on Amazon. So if you want to do a hugely irresponsible purchase, preferably on debt, you can go to Amazon and we get a small amount. Your price stays the same. We get a little dough to pay the electric bill. So thanks for your support. Tell your friends, rate us on iTunes. And now back to the podcast.
Mike Murphy. Podcasting sanity. Radio Free GOP.
So what counts about this convention when they, clean up the balloon drops and the confetti and the media leaves to go do the same thing with the Democrats next week in Philadelphia? What counts is Thursday night. All the problems they've had are preliminary. They're not good, but it's all going to be down to that Trump speech. You get very few of the big paintbrushes in a presidential campaign that really move numbers and really affect the race. The debates are some. The convention speech is one of the biggest. So it's on Trump now. He's the nominee. He won it fair and square. Can he rise to the occasion? Will he give just a rant, a drunken wedding toast about everything he's mad about this week, from they can't get good meatloaf in Cleveland to Melania's speech was covered unfairly by the media? Or will he reach out of the hall and not appeal just to base Republican primary voters and lay out a grown-up candidacy, a rationale for a candidacy, a message that's creative? That's the question, and frankly, that's the test. We'll see how he does. The stakes will be high, and we're all going to be watching. I'll be on NBC as always. I'll be on the Today Show Thursday morning. I'll be on MSNBC Primetime and a few places in between, and I'll try to call it fair and straight. And now let's go to Jonathan Martin, national political reporter of the New York Times. One of our many fun interviews we did at the Harbor Inn, which is this great old bar in Cleveland, oldest bar in town. Thanks to Ken and the staff there for helping us out. Jonathan is going to talk about how the media covers this stuff, how the big machine really works, and what it's like to be a national political reporter covering a very interesting convention.
It's time to ask some questions and go behind the scenes. Here's our latest interview. We'll try to keep it clean. Radio Free GOP.
We're here with my old friend Jonathan Martin, who's one of the ace pencils at the fabulous and famous left-wing rag, the New York Times. Jonathan, thanks for doing Radio Free GOP.
It's good to be here on the banks of Lake Erie, and I appreciate that bribery you offered with the burger. That will get you nowhere with me.
The Harbor Inn burger, it's been known to, stop a buffalo in its tracks. It's one of the larger hamburgers here in Cleveland, a town that knows its way around large hamburgers.
A very effective depth charge in the lake here during the war, I assume, too.
Yeah, no, it was a classified weapon, but pretty good. I like the old Harbor Inn. This is real Cleveland here. I just wanted to check in a little bit about how the media sausage is made these days in the modern campaign, particularly the Trump era. Tell me a little bit about how you got into this journalism racket. Like safe cracking didn't work out, or what got you here?
So I grew up in Virginia and always kind of knew I wanted to do something in and around politics, history, government. Worked in politics after college for a few years. Loved politics, but really had no interest in advocating for one side or the other. I didn't have views that were that sort of strong. I was more of a natural smart aleck than anything else. And so that was kind of a natural place to go, the media, because where do you find more smart alecks than the media?
So you were a body man, right?
I was a body man. I say it's the best job you can have in politics, because right out of college, I drove around this guy that ran for governor of Virginia, a good guy named Mark Earley, and went to every county and city in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The good, the bad, and the ugly. You are exposed to it. You can't avoid it, and you learn so much about how politics really works, and also how the press works too, and what campaigns and candidates do with regard to the press. It's a good BS detector now, because I know when they say, oh, we don't even read that stuff, or we don't care about that story. I mean, they're consuming it immediately.
You watch the candidate spit the ham sandwich out at the windshield when he reads the bad clip, or you hear the phone calls. It is the ultimate training job.
Yeah, and so I was pretty young, and it was just in the sort of dawn of the cell phone era, when cell phone quality was decent but not great, but before really the BlackBerry era. So the candidate couldn't really email on the fly. He had to talk on the phone. So I heard everything. There was no kind of like private email or text between the candidate and back at the HQ. It was all get in the car after the event, grab the cell phone, and just bark at whoever was back there about, I got ambushed here by some reporter. What's going on? Right. And I heard it all. And also sort of seeing how politicians and candidates interact with each other was very instructive too. What you learn is the fiercest rivalries in politics are intra-party.
Oh, yeah. No, completely. You get what I call the great cut-to point of view, which is you're seeing what the press and everybody sees at the event, and then you're in the car when the candidate's picking up the card. I want him killed. I want his family killed. You get to be a fly on the wall, literally. Yes. And you learn to anticipate, be there early. You learn the rhythms. It's the great job. Body men tend to go on to do lots of stuff in politics, but you went off into journalism.
Yeah.
So here we are at the Republican convention. We're taping this on day 2. So where are we today? I guess we're reeling from Melania speech madness. The speech writing team of Xerox and Conga are probably not going to be around much longer. Maybe not even Mr. Manafort. This thing is going to claim a body, I think. I just don't know which one.
It's hard to see how they don't try to turn the page on this with some kind of action. Now, Trump would never apologize, because Trump won't apologize.
Yeah, he's incapable.
That's his thing. But they have to find some way to kind of move on from this.
It's a bad day to be Manafort's least favorite intern.
It is.
Because then next thing you know, you're going to be speechwriter Jones, who's going to have to resign.
And hang out your own shingle. But this whole episode really does illustrate that it's not really a campaign they have going on here in any traditional sense that you and I are familiar with. They've constructed an organization around a candidate who was quite unique, shall we say. But it's just not the kind of sophisticated operation that we're used to. And it was fascinating because this went down at about midnight on the first night of the convention, and it exploded online. Well, most campaigns in this era, if that kind of thing happened, and you had a presidential campaign at their convention, there would be a kind of Amber Alert type aggressiveness and racing to address this issue. Deep concern. Conference calls at 2 a.m.
Oh, yeah, no, look, everybody's
emails
up all
flying.
night. You figure out the plan, which often is going to be either a body or an apology or both, and then you make sure every single horn in the orchestra of the GOP is by sunup on the thing, so it's done by noon.
Yes, and there's talking points all around when the rooster comes up, exactly.
Right.
And, I saw that the chairman of the RNC, Ryan Priebus, had a breakfast at 8 o'clock this morning, and he was a little bit late. And I assumed that he was late because he was getting, whatever the talking points were, and he was sort of getting on message. They had nothing. I mean, he was just sort of freelancing on his own, doing the best he can. But there was no sort of plan here as far as how to respond to this. They're all making it up as they go. And the reason for that is because the candidate, appears to be immune to any kind of, discipline, structure, tradition.
Yeah, any of the normal rules of gravity,
Right.
and it's worked for him in the primary, but we'll see about a general election, which is a very different battlefield. I think one of the dumbest things campaigns often fall into the trap of is, well, we can't do that. It would show weakness. Well, sometimes retreat and counterattack is exactly the strong thing to do, not the weak one. But these Trump guys love to dig in. So now they've guaranteed this story is going to keep going for a while.
Right. It's like the Star of David issue where Trump's complaint was only that they had somewhat given in and conceded it was a mistake. I mean, there is this ethos that you can never apologize for anything. And I think that's what shapes the organization and the culture of the organization. It just invites hour-long stories to become day-long stories and day-long stories to become week-long stories.
Yeah, we're in a media environment now where little stuff can just go forever because we have like this big vacuum out there that's going to get filled with its voracious appetite every 10 minutes of every day.
Well, and especially at these conventions, which are, what's the old Daniel Borstein line about fake events, right? Media created events. I'm forgetting my history right now, but it's the classic example of that genre of there really is no news here. We know who's going to be the nominee.
Right.
This is really just a sort of 4-day long celebratory PR gathering to draw favorable media attention for the candidate. And so because there is no actual news, the TVs have hours to fill and we in print have pixels to create about an event where there's no actual news peg. So when we actually have real news, Katie bar the door.
Yeah, the big spring takes off and the machine starts to fly and then the ripples, like right now it's moved already today from plagiarism to lack of competent campaign, and now we're already having Corey Lewandowski, the purged former manager, turning on Manafort, the new guy in charge, saying, oh, well, his head ought to roll. So we're going to be into a staff shakeup story here by 3 o'clock. So it's just crazy.
It kind of reminds me of, although it's not quite as intense, at least not just yet, Mike, when I think it was right before the 96 Democratic convention, one of the tabloids came out and reported that Dick Morris had a penchant for committing oral acts on toes.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember that.
Yeah.
I subscribed to Kinky Toe magazine. I remember there was a whole cover story on Dick.
That immediately cast a shadow over the Democratic convention. The Clintons cashiered Dick Morris for the last time, I believe. In 96.
He's had multiple lives.
But that's pre-internet, and that's really sort of pre-social media as well.
It was so funny. You speak. So I was crawling out from under my MSNBC, NBC gig last night at a little before midnight, and I was exhausted. I've been up early on California time, so I'm heading back to the hotel to crash before this morning. And I look at my Twitter feed, and I see some activists tweeting this thing that matched them up.
Right.
And I thought, boy, I should maybe look at the transcripts and figure this out. And I thought, no, the internet will figure this thing out for me in another 2 hours. And it's either going to be huge or it's bullshit. Somebody's screwing around with the transcript. So I had my 5 hours sleep, woke up, and bang, there it is. And that's what we have now. We have this big kind of like, it's almost like crowdfunding world that will just grab stuff, be it Dan Rather's typewriter ribbon or anything else, and develop it. And if there's anything there, it'll mushroom.
And it finds you, by the way, too. That's what's so striking to me about the news cycle now is that you don't have to get a half dozen newspapers dropped at your door at the convention hotel every morning like you would for decades. News finds its way to you now because you just open up your phone and it's either in the form of a breaking news alert or a text from a friend or a tweet that you saw or a Facebook update. It's finding its way to you.
Yeah, social media is great at moving clips around. That's one of the most impressive things it does is move information sideways from a trusted source, a friend. So if a friend sends me a clip that I'm not sure I believe, but if I believe the friend, I read the clip. You guys are a multimedia platform now doing all kinds of internet stories every day, as well as putting out the paper, as opposed to the old day when it was just a paper. You're a national political correspondent at a convention. What is your day like? If we had a GoPro camera following you around, we're protect the sources, the guilty and the innocent. You wake up probably at dawn. Are people pitching things? Are you on a certain beat? You're out looking for things?
The conventions are, like I said a minute ago, there is no real substance to cover. I mean, you cover the speeches because that's sort of the evening theater part of the program. But there's also, during the day, these meals, breakfast and lunches that are sponsored by news organizations that get newsmakers there. Paul Ryan, Reince Priebus, the campaign staff, whoever. And you go to those events and it's all on the record and you can write off of that. And so you write for the web from that. And then maybe you include some of that string in your story for the paper the next day, but you'll write that night. It's one of the great political reporting experiences because it's like going back to your high school reunion. You're seeing all your old pals and sources from all over the country. And I travel quite a bit for work, cover a lot of gov races and Senate races, especially the midterm years. So I know a lot of these people who were from California, Mississippi, Missouri, Illinois, and it's fun catching up. And also you can get tidbits about what's happening back home, what's happening in their races, and also, what are you hearing about the convention, what's happening here? And then you head over to the actual convention hall later in the afternoon, and that's the best because I actually had a tweet yesterday. The two best places for impromptu political reporting in America are the U.S. Capitol, where there's no staff and all principals walking around, and it's just heaven for us because you can just grab these guys.
A school of fish, you just pick the shiny one and pounce.
It's wonderful. Yeah. And you can just sort of stake out the subway in the basement of the Capitol. And the second best place are the concourses of the convention arenas every 4 years because everybody's walking around.
Well, it's a shoot, too. They got to go through them. So
yes.
You're there. Yeah.
You're there, and they all at some point have to go to the bathroom or have to go eat something. And so they walk out, and you're right there, and you grab them.
It's like the old story about the world's largest catfish. How did it get so big? It opened its mouth by a dam.
That was it.
And just got there and it got so big it couldn't move.
The end. And also, if you're lucky enough to get a floor pass, which is sort of the coin of the realm at these conventions, you get the floor pass, you can get out of the concourse onto the floor itself of the convention, and then you just walk around, find people there. They don't find you. You can just sort of walk around. You look up, you see which state you're in. You can get the governor. I saw Terry Branstad last night.
Oh, yeah.
The governor of Iowa has been governor of Iowa since, I think, the Hayes presidency.
I did his fourth term, and we were joking the slogan ought to be, year 12 through 16, reelect change.
Right, exactly. But, you grab him. Oh, there's a former state party chairman over there. And,
right. The old dog state party chairmen are the best because they tend to be opinionated.
Very opinionated. Yeah. They've seen it all. They've got some gripe with somebody or something.
Yeah, they're always pissed off about something. 4 years ago when the vice president came, they didn't pick the right high school band at the tarmac, and they're still cranked up about it.
Still nursing that grievance. And in fact, one of them I was talking about last night was talking about Palin and McCain from 08. I got so many volunteers after Palin got named to the ticket. It was great for our re-elects. And this is 8 years ago. It's also kind of cool because you've got all of these, they're called whips, and they have usually like blaze orange or fire engine red hats on, baseball hats on.
And often Gucci lopers. Half of them are K Street lobbyists.
That's exactly right.
And this is kind of a hobby. It's like a subculture to be a convention operative, and they're very proud about it. And they tend to be perennial pros who do it time and time and time again because it's a special skill.
And they come out usually 10 days, 2 weeks before these things. They set up shop. They find like a good steakhouse they go to every night.
Right.
And it's neat. But Mike, I have to say, is sort of seeing some of these guys that I know from back in D.C. Who are lobbyists, who are in fact wearing Gucci, working a Trump event, it is a little bit jarring because you're talking to these guys while the sort of like Fox News Benghazi variety show is happening on stage, and you're talking to these lobbyists about Trump, and they're obviously not supporting him in any real way, but they're there because they're there. It's fun. It's what you do.
And it's the culture. These guys, I mean, there are different tribes in politics, as you well know. Yeah. And the folks who do convention floor ops, they have a real kind of Marine Corps-like pride at doing a hard thing well. Yeah. They come in, they do the convention, and then they leave. And so I know a bunch of these guys, and they're conflicted about Trump, but they're always like, this is what I do. I operate a good convention. It's professional. I'm going to do it. And then the voters will figure out this Trump guy. And by the way, I may not vote for him either, but I'll tell you, I'm going to make sure Rhode Island stays right on the damn clock. And you saw that the other day when Reince pushed the red button to decide it was time to steamroll this small insurgency they had, and the machine went to work, and wham. You know, Mayor Daley in his grave is quietly applauding because they just rammed it right through.
And they're doing it, to your point, not because they have any great passion for this year's nominee, but because there is a sort of muscle memory of conventions past, and this is what you do. And also, it's about making the party look good.
Right.
And putting on...
they have an institutional professional pride in it. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be striking, though, to sort of see these next few nights whether or not the program itself will be more sort of tightened up and disciplined. And, I just thought, watching this last night, the first night of the convention, seeing Joni Ernst, the Iowa senator, speaking at 11:08 Eastern, where literally half the convention floor and rafters was already gone at that point. My goodness, I just know for a fact
they misspent one of their stars. That was a rookie error,
and it was infuriating. I know. I actually emailed with one of the individuals who's in charge of this convention, and just cold fury about what happened.
And just to put a footnote on that, by in charge of the convention, one of the pros who runs the machinery, as opposed to some high command that decided to slot stuff in, because these are kind of the middle level colonels.
That's right, and they have what's called the line by line. They have what's called the line by line, which is basically down to the minute who is speaking, and they are very concerned about keeping that as close as possible to the actual time. And when it runs over, their blood pressure goes up.
Now, what kind of reaction on the floor are you getting? Because we're in day 2 of a convention that's not getting good reviews, at least so far. Maybe Trump will do great and things could change. Are you seeing some of your sources see it coming under those bright lights on the floor and thinking not a good time to talk to New York Times, and they scurry away? I mean, have you had a few?
Yeah. It's clear that there are some folks that aren't that excited about having a conversation with you. They kind of talk for a second and then find a way to get away. But that's the beauty of the floor, Mike, is that if you have that path, you can just chase them around.
Right. You got those corridors. They're funnels that they can't escape. A gauntlet of questions.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
I think one of the best things that's happened to political reporters of your generation is when they started giving senators BlackBerries.
Yes.
Because all of a sudden there was a way to communicate directly with the principal. I can't tell you a number of campaigns where we had, the deep throat and we go crazy trying to figure out who it was. We finally figure out it's the damn candidate.
Right.
Who love to do that, by the way. Candidates love to directly talk to the press on an off-the-record basis and not tell their staff. So,
thank God for that too, and we appreciate all those who do, and may their tribe increase. There's no question that it has changed the profession dramatically, being able to email or now text oftentimes these elected officials to sort of figure out what actually is going on, especially when it comes to kind of meetings or lunches where it's closed door to the press and there's all kinds of juicy stuff being said in there. Occasionally those are no staff, and so you have to go to the principal themselves to get that kind of information.
But they're the perfect off-the-record source, because when you get a principal talking, you can with an unattributed quote, you can go a long way, because there's no secondhand and the newsmakers talking.
Yeah, exactly. If that person was involved in whatever you're describing, then it's gold, because you don't have to sort of do the backbreaking attribution of so-and-so who was briefed on so-and-so event.
So how many sharks do you guys have here covering this thing? You have a bunch of New York Times
people
reporters.
Here. Yeah, I would say that there's probably 35 to 40 reporters and editors here. But keep in mind now, I mean, we've got video people, we've got admin support, we've got editors, we've got reporters, obviously. So it's a pretty big flotilla.
How does the quarterback huddle work? Do you guys have an early call or an early meeting and, hut hike and off that you all go?
There's a conference call every morning, 8:45. Yeah, exactly. And so You start talking about like that day, the plan, what's ahead, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then off you go, and at the end of the day, recap, and off it goes.
Yeah, and it's a little bit more hectic now because the Trump deal is so improvisational that news happens as it happens. It's harder to plan for. You get speech excerpts, but who knows if they're actually going to stick to them.
That's what I'm most interested in the wake of Melania's split screen disaster here, is will it get under his skin and he'll throw whatever speech they're trying to get him to do away and just do a rant. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who the heck knows? But that's a real challenge for us. Even with the internet, and obviously we have a robust website, www.nytimes.com. And by the way, my Twitter handle is jmartnyt. If you want to follow me on Twitter, we're still a paper. And we've basically got 3 deadlines at night at these conventions for the next day's paper that we have to meet. The last one is about midnight, and that's kind of the drop dead, where you have to get stuff in. So while we are...
Knowing the Trump campaign, the apology will finally come out of them at 1 a.m.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
to blow that and go even one more day.
But no, we were scrambling on the first night of the convention, literally on deadline, the last deadline, to get something in there in the print paper about the plagiarism issue. So it's an interesting mix. We're very web savvy now. We, obviously have live stories during the day, but you still have to feed that beast every night.
So going forward, we're going to leave this convention. Do you go off to Philadelphia for the Democratic one?
Yeah.
And it's rinse and repeat, right? Same deal?
Yeah, I'll go home for a day, and then we'll take the train to Philly from D.C. Yeah.
And are the Dems enjoying this as much as I think they are? Is your phone ringing with their flags?
Oh, yeah.
Or are they kind of letting the Republicans get tangled up on their own?
No,
they can't resist.
They're having a blast. I mean, plus Twitter now, it's so inviting, and it's like, come on, and the water's warm kind of thing. They can't help themselves. And especially because with Michelle Obama.
Right.
And the Democratic Party loves her. And the fact that, Trump castigates the Obamas and then his wife is relying upon Michelle Obama's speech, it's just too delicious for them to resist. They're also privately amazed at how lucky they are because,
that's what I think.
Because they're convinced that one of the few candidates that they could have beaten this year is Donald Trump. I mean, there was real concern in their ranks that
Hillary's very weak. I mean, this was a year where we really had a shot, and maybe we still do. I'm pessimistic about it, but they should feel very lucky, which should make them paranoid too. That maybe the luck is about to run, because the great luck wheel always turns.
Yeah, there was almost this hesitation to go after Trump too hard before the convention because they had this kind of fear of some well hidden GOP establishment hand coming out from the depths of Lake Erie to seize the nomination for candidate X that was not Donald Trump. And so I think now that he is officially crowned here, I think you'll see even harsher attacks on him. But I expect their convention to be much more choreographed and predictable, though. Anyways.
Yeah, no, I think we're acting more like Democrats with our kind of crazy, a little off-scripted convention here, which is a reversal of history.
The parties have, in the last few years, flipped their places. The Republican Party is a much more fractious party that is filled with the kind of disparate elements that you saw really in the Democratic Party for much of the first 2/3 of the 20th century. And that's more now where you guys are. Folks that just don't have much in common, and
it's becoming a character building experience for us. So you mentioned Michelle Obama. I'll bet though that somewhere in Obama land there are a couple of nervous staffers right now, and this would be anticipating a more state-of-the-art Republican campaign than we're giving them, but scrubbing every speech she has ever given,
I know what you're gonna
even
say.
for national proper haircut day, looking for any line that, I mean, you can imagine because that's the next thing if it's there, and that's what we Republicans would go on offense with if we have it.
Well, my conservative friends this morning were in my inbox by dawn with what I call the old but the other side,
right?
Fill in the blank. And in this case, it was, of course, Joe Biden, right? Who lifted passages from Neil Kinnock, the British politician, when he ran for president in 1988. So,
I mean, he really lifted too. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
He jammed the Xerox machine compared to what we got now. But it's plagiarism either way. But boy, it has to be a good hit to work. But if one pops up, I'm sure first rule is you want to know the trouble yourself first. So I'm sure they're scrubbing like crazy. I'm not sure the Trump guys, because they're probably having food fights inside the campaign or God knows what. Or
keep an eye on Breitbart. on Breitbart.com, because if there is a Michelle a plagiarism history out there, we'll know where to find it first.
Yes, yeah, exactly. After this, where do you go? Is it a zone system, or do you kind of free range? And
we'll have individual reporters who are covering the candidates and on the plane for the rest of the cycle. I'll probably pop into events and travel with candidates occasionally, but I'll sort of largely pick my spots.
Is there one particular kind of campaign aspect you're particularly curious about, or one set of states? Everybody has kind of their thing they like to keep an eye on. There's certain counties I watch around the country.
I'm really interested in seeing the possibilities for a true reversal of the map. And what I mean by that is these sort of old industrial cities that have been Democratic for years, but that have lost business, have lost residents. I don't necessarily
like Cleveland. We're in one right now.
I mean, Cleveland's a fairly good African American community, so it might be a different story. But like the more heavily white, what used to be called ethnic cities.
Northeastern Pennsylvania, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre.
Sure, and even Youngstown, Ohio. Right. Those kinds of places that have a strong labor presence, that are deeply ingrained in the kind of Democratic Party of Roosevelt, Truman, and Kennedy. Do those kind of places flip now firmly and for the long term to the Republicans? We've seen some of that in the Obama era, obviously, and so I'm not sure how many more of those places there are for Democrats to lose. But if I was a Democrat, what I'd be nervous about is you don't just start losing the Scrantons of the world. You lose them by big margins.
Right, and you give us the ability to roll up and off, to our supermajorities there, overcome the minority vote where we get slaughtered.
Yes.
I think Trump's problem in that equation, because he is catnip for angry or blue-collar voters, is gender problem. The offset of minority and the gender problem, because he's still in the white voter world. He's still only batting maybe 5 innings out of 9,
right?
Because college-educated white women are not.
That's
not
exactly right. I was talking to a colleague recently. I said we hear so much about working class white voters from Johnstown, but how about college-educated white women from McLean?
Yeah,
I was at coffee shop in McLean the other week, and
for our listeners in the Virgin Islands and around the world, that's a prosperous suburb of Northern Virginia near Washington, D.C.
And traditionally known as kind of the Republican enclave, right?
Absolutely.
Full of well-heeled GOP lobbyists and fixers, but increasingly a Democratic area. I was at a coffee shop there a few weeks ago over here on a table of 4 or 5 ladies, probably in their 50s. Oh my gosh, they just were appalled by Donald Trump.
Yeah.
These folks should be gettable for the Republicans. I think they probably voted for Bush at least once.
Oh yeah.
And so I think that's the challenge: is that yes, the proverbial deer hunter voter out there is now moving to the Republican Party, but that didn't just start this year. That's been going on now for a few years, and I'm not sure that the Republicans can make up for that because of the losses they're going to suffer among college-educated whites and non-whites.
Yeah, it's not a good trade when you pick up better and shrinking Macomb County north of Detroit in the shadow of the General Motors plant or Warren Tech Center or whatever, and you're giving away the Atlanta suburbs in Gwinnett County.
Right.
You're just on the now that was not such a bad trade in 1978. But it's not a great trade now, and that's going to be the great Trump experiment. If Trump can even get a competent campaign enough to make that argument, which right now is a little shaky.
Yeah, I saw some joke the other day that the Trump campaign is actually like one big political science experiment.
Yeah.
Can you run a kind of white grievance campaign with the demography of 2016 in the wake of our first black president and still win or even be competitive?
Right.
It's going to be so revealing to see what happens.
I think the real political science experiment would be if Bernie Sanders in their process did not have superdelegates and Democrats, because even though she would still have an edge if you pull him out, I think the dynamic of the campaign could have been a lot different. He might well have been nominated, and then you'd have Trump v. Sanders, which is a mirror of the resentment politics that have seized our system right now.
But I think in that case, wouldn't you have had a sort of Gary Johnson on steroids? I mean, so Gary Johnson is the libertarian nominee, former GOP governor of New Mexico, but somebody who is not expected to get more than 10-12% nationally this time around, which is still, by the way, not bad for a third party.
Numbers,
yeah, exactly.
No, that would have blown up, and you would have had a Bloomberg type.
You would have had a Bloomberg type, right?
Yeah.
You would have had a sort of centrist, business-friendly candidate to,
super grown up,
who wouldn't scare the sheep. Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly. What do you see coming? Because political coverage is changing so much. We've had Trump and the pop culturization of everything. It's all a reality show. And you've got technology disrupting your business as well as mine in the regular world of politics and communication. What do you think 4 years from now the convention will be like? I mean, other than we're all going to have to do it in space or something.
My guess is it's eventually going to move to 3 nights.
Yeah, I agree.
And that the TVs will probably give it even less coverage. I just think they're going to have a harder time justifying it. I also think you'll see much more creativity when it comes to the presentations, holograms or whatever, or, virtual reality, people just stepping out of screens. Who knows? But whatever the advance is by then, the delegates wearing their Google glasses and we're sort of watching this, whatever the 2024 version of 3D is.
Hoverboards. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I agree. The presentation stuff will change. I think we're still basically running a 1910 system here, and that'll modernize to reflect television, both to feed your base through round-the-clock cable and the internet and streaming, and try to grab the country in some big primetime spectaculars. I mean, I would trade that. If I could get 2 nights I program at 90 minutes each with massive primetime coverage, I'd give up a lot of, silly daytime stuff.
They'll have to be more creative too, whether that's, putting, GoPros or whatever the next iteration of that is on the speakers, or just something that's kind of different than, as you point out, what you would have seen in your living room decades ago, which is politicians giving a speech, looking into a camera, and then walking off the stage. I mean, that's pretty much it, right?
I mean, I remember there's the great 56 story of how they opened some stuff up because it was the first TV convention. They didn't think anybody would watch, so they wanted to create conflict. That wheel may turn and we could be back there again, creating semi-real conflict just to drive an audience here, because if that's one thing the process has learned from Donald Trump is that conflict brings in eyeballs, for good or bad.
I mean, imagine if we had cameras behind the scenes on the first day of the convention when they were hashing out this question about whether or not to have a roll call vote on the rules, and you would see the arm twisting, going on. I mean, there were a few kind of crude videos that were posted on Twitter that were purportedly of the act, caught in the act. These pros are shaking down delegates saying, "Come on, get on board here, you're killing us."
No, they were bringing them in to undo those 9 states.
But imagine if you had all that televised.
Oh, it'd be incredible. But you would see
videoized
the famous Mark Hanna pair of pliers they use on state chairmen who misbehave under the podium, which are kept in a little wooden box. But I'm not supposed to talk about them. Well, thank you for doing this. It was great to have you here. Tell me your Twitter handle and web stuff one more time.
The Twitter handle is jmartnyt. And the website is www.nytimes.com. All the news fit to print and post.
Fight for sanity in this crazy year on Radio Free GOP.
Okay, that's it from Cleveland. It has been great here at the Republican Convention. We'll give you an update afterward with part 2. In the meantime, I want to thank Ken and the whole gang at the Harbor Inn. They were great. It's a wonderful bar. You got to check it out if you're ever down here. And a special thanks to my henchwomen, my trained Republican operatives who helped me with everything I was doing here at the conventions, the wonderful Grace Huffman and the formidable Jessica Go-Kart Beauchart up from Mississippi. They did a lot of Republican hijinks around here. God knows what they were really up to, but they made it incredibly easy for me to get the podcast done and get around town to do my obligations. So thank you to them, and thank you to you for listening. Thank you to the many podcast listeners who came up and said hello here in Cleveland. I'm glad you're enjoying it. We will keep it up. As always, you can send comments to comment@radiofreegop.com. And follow us on the Twitter @RadioFreeGOP. You can follow me @MurphyMike. And there it is, the sound, the thought police. They're back on our trail. They want orthodoxy, and we will not give it to them. So time to escape. Luckily, We have a leaky rowboat here outside the Harbor Inn, and we have Lake Erie and a match. So all I need to do is light the lake on fire, and we can see, oh my goodness, all the way to Canada. Actually, that's a cheap shot. The lake is clean now. People fish in it all the time. Cleveland's coming back. Come visit. And until our next podcast, remember, victory will be ours. Thanks for listening.
This has been Radio Free GOP, the voice of the Republican resistance, with your host, Mike Murphy.